Well, Samuel Greene is director of the Russia Institute at King's College London and joins us now from Farnham in Surrey. Thanks very much for coming on to Al Jazeera. I almost feel we should have some sympathy with the Russian voter, with the opposition saying, well, with a smart vote for somebody else, and the United Russia Party candidates basically saying, well, we're not representing United Russia. What's your reading of who's actually going to make a decent amount of votes from this?
Well, I mean, it really depends on the area, right? So we've heard mostly about Moscow, but we've had elections as well in St. Petersburg and in the Russian Far East and other parts of the country. As your report suggested, United Russia is unpopular, is really not on a path to regaining that popularity. And I think the Kremlin's main concern right now is to make sure that the unpopularity of the ruling party doesn't rub off on the president as he begins to think about what the country's political future looks like after his current term comes to an end in 2024. And so we're seeing a lot of sort of risk management, and I think their approach initially was to try to just get people not to pay too much attention to the elections, right? So you don't let the candidates that they're excited about run. You then run candidates that nobody can identify, and you really hope that people stay home. And it did lead to a very significant amount of protest, which of course they met with a very significant amount of force. So that has. And on
that particular point about people staying home, and the early reports were that turnout was low. On the flip side of that, do we expect to know what the actual tally is? Are we going to see an honest figure at the end of this?
Well, we're beginning to see some early numbers coming in, and it does seem to be a mix, right? And we often, unfortunately, in these sorts of cases, see significant changes between the early numbers and then the actual numbers that are recorded by the Electoral Commission. It does look in some places, like in St. Petersburg, that the government's favored candidate has won. In other places in the Far East, the government has lost by a wide margin. The best estimates I've seen so far from Moscow suggest that United Russia, or its candidates, even though they're not running under that label, will get between 55% and 60% of the seats in city council. If that does turn out to be the tally, that will actually be taken by the opposition as a fairly good showing, even though, as you mentioned, as your reporter mentioned, most of those seats will go to the communists rather than the liberals.
So almost a chink of light, really, for the opposition. How do they build on this if there is a momentum here? Where do they go next?
Well, really what they need to do, I think, if they want to have any chance in terms of national level elections, is to begin to try to make some use of the seats that they can win on the ground, whether in municipal elections or in regional governments, to show that electing somebody else would actually make a difference in people's lives. The biggest sort of watershed in Russian politics isn't between people who think that the country is well governed or poorly governed. Everybody pretty much understands that it's poorly governed, but they assume that it doesn't really matter who's in power, right? So if you can begin to change that point of view, then you might be able to change politics.
Samuel Greene, thank you so much for speaking to us from the Russia Institute.